Everybody, welcome back to me. One of those things, apparently Zoom's been updating. Zoom didn't tell me it was going to update. So artificial intelligence, but it seems to me it's more artificial and less intelligent sometimes. So here we are. So implementing positive psychological practices during a time of economic challenge. Now we've had a few of these things, a few variations on these. I want to just introduce myself. Now I know some of the people, I've seen some of the names who have signed in, and some people I know, some people are old friends, and some people have done lots of work with us in the past, and then some people are completely new. So there's going to be a range of different ways of focusing and benefiting from this. So for the people who don't know, this is just a quick presentation, a quick slide to let you know who I am, what I'm part of, and what kind of things I've done, and so on. And we continue to do these things. For many years we ran we still do run Transformations Institute and in this region, and we're now collaborating with Illuminations to do the same work. We just like to show off a bit with this one because we're the only people who have won this award twice, 2 years. So feel free to cheer at this point, but just keep your microphones muted. Now, I'm going to get stuck right into this immediately. And this presentation has been designed with certain elements in mind. So you may or may not notice there are certain recurring symbols, and the reasons for that are that while I talk to you, to your conscious mind, the images are intended to speak to your unconscious mind, and somewhere in between there, perhaps something new and something special can happen. Now, this is one of those sayings, you may have come across it, when the winds of change blow strong, some people build walls while others build windmills. They say it's Chinese, but I don't know. You could try, there are interesting fake quote websites you could try. Fake Buddha quotes is one of my favorites. And this, maybe you'll find this on a fake Chinese website, because people are always saying that the Chinese said something or other. And they probably did. They've been around for a long time. They've had civilization and writing longer than most people, so they probably said lots of things. But it's a good saying. It's an interesting saying, because that's the basic choice we have. And now, whether we're talking about personal change, something that happens in our own lives, that happens in our health, our relationships, our income, or if we're talking about big global changes like the sort of nonsense that we're being subjected to now. The fact is, we still have two choices. We can either just try to protect ourselves from those things, and that can be a good thing as well. We also need protection. However, it doesn't only just have to be protection. There's also the question of, can we use the new forces? Can we use the changes? Now, this is something I've done in my life a lot. And people I've worked with will know that my attitude towards physical illness, for instance, is that when I get ill, which I very, very rarely do, but in the past when I have got ill, the first thing I do is to find out, is to learn, is to use the illness as a way of learning something new. And we can do this in any situation. We can learn something new, we can apply something new. Now, one of the things we're going to do here is we're going to look at a few different models. We have a saying which we got from Robert Fritz, the guy who first created DMA, Dimensional Macrostructural Alignment, in case you haven't come across it. And Robert Fritz said, some ways of thinking are more powerful than others. And that's fundamental to all the kinds of work that we do in our approach to applied positive psychology, because it's true. So the simple example of that everybody knows is, if you think I can't, well then you can't, because you won't even try. If you think even maybe I can, or perhaps I could, then there's something started to happen. And as soon as you start to think I can, okay, there may be other things that you need to do in order to make I can a true statement, but you've opened up the possibilities. Now, sometimes that's the most basic, simple level, and sometimes, there are more things involved. It's not just a matter of sitting down and visualizing that you have a Ferrari and then you look out the window and there's one there, It doesn't seem to actually work that way for most people. We can, though, learn that there are certain models, certain structures that have been found to be repeated throughout time and for all people, probably. And this is one of them. Now, this is from Virginia Satir. Virginia Satir is the person who created family therapy. It didn't really exist before Virginia came along. She passed away some time ago now, but left a tremendous legacy of work, such a powerful legacy, in fact, that other people have studied it and developed their own systems from it. Virginia Satir is one of the people that Richard Bandler studied in order to create NLP. More of that in another webinar, maybe. But for now, this is a useful thing to think about. This is Satya's change process. Now, many people in the business world have adopted this diagram and this way of thinking because, you know, they're always going on about restructuring, you know, which usually means firing people and paying the guys at the top more money. That's what it's meant now for at least 20, 30 years, maybe longer, and it's becoming more like that. However, although that may be true in those big corporate situations, this remains a valid diagram for anybody, individually or within a bigger context, which of course we're all experiencing now. Now, here's what happens. Here's the guy here going along. This would be his normal timeline. He would just continue along. I'm saying he, could be a she. Sorry about the diagram. But he or she could be just continuing their life, but then suddenly something happens. Virginia Steele calls this a foreign element. This is a disruption. This is something that comes out of the blue. Now, we all experience this. This is one of the things that she was concerned a lot. We all have to put up with things that happen that we don't want to happen. One of the points Virginia so you've got to how to resist. This thing has happened. You have your life has left you. Somebody has done. You have left your job. All of society has changed overnight for no good reason. Any number of different things that can happen, that come into our lives and just change everything. And once that happens, the first reaction most people have is to resist. They hang on, they do their best to hang on to the old way. But of course, it doesn't usually help because the old way isn't there anymore, it's changed. So the old things you would do don't work. So you hang on to that for a while, trying to make it work. And you can see this. You may have seen this in your own life. You may have seen this with other people when some big change has happened. And after a while, they descend into chaos. It all starts hanging on, but they can't hang on. It falls apart, and then they stumble and they fall. However, there is the potential here, and this doesn't happen for many people, but there is the potential here to have what Virginia called a transforming idea. This is where something new comes in, something you hadn't thought of before. And that's important. It's going to be something you hadn't thought of. If it was something you'd thought of, it would be part of the old system. It would be part of this. So it's going to be something new. Once you get the transforming idea, then what can happen is you can start to climb up. You can start to get out of that situation. Sorry, wrong direction. You can start to climb up out of that situation and integrate the new information and then create a new status quo. Now, for the scientifically minded people, you might want to have a look at Thomas Kuhn's seminal work, Structure of the Scientific Paradigm, in which he talks about the paradigm change, where you have a certain belief of how things are, and that belief is fine until reality pops up and shows you that that's no longer true. So however much you believed it, however much it used to work for you, it doesn't anymore. And then you have to have a new paradigm, you have to have a new concept, new way of doing things. Now, in NLP, and this terminology has gone into other systems too, we call this a reframe. We're seeing the same things, but in a new way. Now, here's an example I like, and some people might recognize this. Here's a quote from Virginia. It's not what it's supposed to be, it's what it is. That's key. It's what it is, and it's going to be what it is. It's the way you cope with it that makes the difference. Now, you may have come across this story. There's a plant called the burdock plant, and if you've ever lived somewhere where these things grow, if you've ever worn clothes, if you've ever had a dog or a small child, then you will have found that these things will stick onto your clothes. They will stick onto your child. They'll get in your hair. They'll get on the dog. They get everywhere. And there was a particular guy, an engineer, Swiss electrical engineer called Georges de Mestral, who was presumably in French part of Switzerland. He used to like hiking up in the Alps, but every time he came back, his dog would be covered in burrs. Now, he wondered about these burrs. Now, here's where you get the reframe. Here's where you get the transforming idea. People who've done NLP with me or with somebody else should be familiar with this concept, the reframe, the different way of looking at things. You either look at it from a great distance in time, you look at it from a great distance in space, or you go in close and you look at it under a microscope, you look at it closely. And when you look at something, and this isn't just true of burdocks, this is true of relationships, this is true of finances, which is what we're talking about today. This is true of any situation at all. If you look at something differently, then you learn something. And the thing that Georges de Mestral learned was how to invent Velcro, so he did. So what he discovered is that these burrs had a certain structure, and I'm big on structure because everywhere you look, you will find structure. Now, if you don't look, you won't find it. If you don't find it, you can't use it. So it's really useful, and we do this a lot again in some of the work that we do. It's really useful to spot the underlying structures. There are structures to behavior, structures to language, structures to thinking, structures to emotions, structures to behavior everywhere. And some things like CBT, we just did a CBT course the other day. There's another one coming up shortly. CBT looks at certain structures of how the structure of thinking, feeling, and behavior run in a self-perpetuating loop. So if we can identify the structures, so this is a physical example, he identified these physical structures, which enabled him to invent something which is now ubiquitous. It's everywhere. Everybody knows about Velcro. Everybody uses Velcro, even on the moon. So what we want to encourage, just going back or forwards, I don't know where I am with this anymore. Let's just have a look at this. Looks like forward. We want to encourage people doing this kind of work, taking part in this webinar today, to start to focus on some aspect of your life, which this is about prosperity, but these principles we're going to talk about relate to everything. And I also invite people to think about what prosperity is. Yes, we all want more money, and that's important and it's useful and so on. However, you can have more money and have a miserable life. You know, there's an endless list of celebrities. I can't even remember who the latest one was. There were so many of them. Endless list of millionaire celebrities who just kill themselves or become drug addicts. There's more than one kind of prosperity. Now, what we're going to look at is the kind of prosperity that we develop inside ourselves in order to make it more likely that we can develop it outside of ourselves. And the nice thing is about this is that either way, you win. Because ultimately, you just have yourself anyway. However much money you have in the bank, however many numbers come up on your computer screen, however full your wardrobe is, it's what's inside you. When you close your eyes at night, it's what's inside you that matters. So here's the difference. We like to talk about the difference that makes the difference. So here we are with Virginia's diagram again, descending into chaos, desperately hanging on, not being able to hang on. Gravity is a powerful force, drags you down. You eventually get to that point where you stumble and you fall. Unless you can do the reframe, unless you can look closely. Now, I don't know everybody on this this particular webinar, but I'm sure you can all think of examples, maybe in your own life, maybe in history, maybe in your chosen field of interest, where there are examples of people reframing things. In order to invent penicillin, which has saved millions of lives, over decades and decades, somebody reframed some mold. Something that had gone bad and old and moldy and rotten was examined closely and found to be able to be used in a different context. So this is what we want to focus on. How do we get that idea? How do we get to the difference that makes the difference? So we've come up with a couple of things that can help to do that. And again, you're going to notice there's a structure to what we're talking about here. In order to be able to identify the difference that makes the difference, and there always is one in any situation, we need first a resourceful state. Now, by a resourceful state, we mean a positive state. We mean a condition of being, which is good. And what we're going to focus on in this one is happiness. It's nice and simple, isn't it? And apparently it's very popular in Dubai. We have a Ministry of Happiness, and we have big smiley faces. I'm thinking they should start producing face masks now with smiley faces on, because I think that would be a lot more fun if we did it that way. I don't know. I saw one recently where somebody actually had a skull on. They had like this, this skull kind of teeth and everything on the face mask, and I thought that's the wrong way to go. If you're going to wear a mask, at least make it fun, But we're going to focus on this on happiness, and the reason we're going to focus on that is because it's actually quite simple to produce a state of happiness. Now, when we say state, we use it in the NLP sense of the word. We use it to mean your entire being. People often talk about feelings. You have to get this feeling. You have to get that feeling. Well, thoughts and feelings and behavior all work together. And we're multi-dimensional beings. And I don't mean by that we're off in some other space, some other dimension entirely. We might be. But I don't mean that at the moment. What I mean is we exist physically, mentally, emotionally, bioelectrically, biochemically, biologically. We exist in all these ways simultaneously, and what we want to do is be able to induce a state in which all of those things are working together. Dr. Joe Dispenza, you may have heard of. If you haven't, check him out. Dr. Joe Dispenza has done a huge amount of research on what creates a state in a human being, whether a good state or a bad state, points out that you can't think outside of your emotions. Your emotions are the chemicals in which, the chemical soup in which your thoughts take place. So we really need to get these things working together. Similarly, it's very difficult to have a good emotion when all you have is bad thoughts. So we're going to suggest in this that we use a structure. And this structure is one, to generate a resourceful state. And we're going to suggest that happiness is a good place to start. There are other resourceful states, inspiration, enlightenment. There's also all sorts of other things. We're going to focus on this one because we have a simple technology from Harvard University that enables us to do that. And then two, a clear vision of what you want to create. And I'll just introduce you down here to something that I created and was my clear vision of what I wanted to create. Now, here's how it works. Your brain already knows how to do this. We're going to look at what happens when you have a negative thought, a negative experience. You produce an image in your frontal lobes, and this image is transmitted to the center of your brain and then to your back brain. Now, once that happens, then certain chemicals are generated. And because we're looking at the negative one because it's common, it's automatic, everybody knows about it, and everybody's probably familiar with the chemicals. Adrenaline and cortisol are the key chemicals. These are the chemicals that will be present in fear and in anger. They're generated by the adrenal glands, little glands that sit on the top of your kidneys. So what we're going to talk about today, about how to become prosperous inside in order to be more likely to become prosperous outside, is we're going to talk about how we engage this process that our brain already does automatically. Because you may know, some people may know this already from the work they've done, the studies they've undertaken, that whatever we present to our brain as an image, and that will go along with thoughts, whatever we present, your brain can't tell the difference. This is neuroscience. Neuroscientists have finally caught up with psychologists and the mystics, and neuroscience now finally has been able to measure it and understand it. Which is that your brain doesn't know the difference between something good and something bad, or something real or something unreal. It's all the same. It just responds to it all as if it's real, and it generates the chemicals. The chemicals flow through your system. They make you have certain physical sensations. They make you have certain emotions. They make you have certain thoughts, and then you will be in that loop. So the negative loop is what tends to happen automatically, and that seems to be because we're programmed to spot danger. We're programmed to spot threats to our existence. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't still be here after these millions of years. So it's programmed to do that. However, that doesn't work for us a lot of the time in a sophisticated modern society. So we want to look at deliberately, consciously structuring the images that we put into our brains so that those automatic processes can take place in a way that is beneficial to us and can produce endorphins and serotonin and all the good chemicals that will be useful to us. So what's important to understand is that we always have a choice between stimulus and response. There's a space. So it's a quote from Viktor Frankl. Again, if you don't know Viktor Frankl, check him out. He was a doctor. He was a Jewish doctor in, I believe, Germany or Austria, around about the time of the Second World War. And he was interned in Auschwitz. And if you know anything about Auschwitz, that's probably about as bad as it gets. But here's an interesting thing that Frankl discovered through that period of time, is that you always have a choice. Now, people who meditate deeply will understand this already. And people who have studied things like NLP and CBT should understand this already, is that there is a space between the end of one thought and between the beginning of a second thought. There is a space. If you can become aware of that space, you have the opportunity to change. If you're not aware of it, things roll on automatically. Between every breath, the end of every breath and the beginning of every new breath, there is a space. Now, in that moment, and this moment can be very, very short, in that moment, there's the possibility for change. There's the possibility for you to choose to go into what we like to call survival mode, which is a bad strategy generally. Survival mode is good when you need to survive, right? If you are being chased by a tiger, if somebody is coming at you with an axe, this is the time to go into survival mode. This is when you focus your attention right down to what's happening here and now in this moment, and you don't want to think about anything else. However, most of the time, with the things that we deal with, that's not really helpful. If you're dealing right now with having lost your job or having had your income decreased or being stuck in a place that you never wanted to be because you've been locked down here, which is what's happened to us, for example. We're supposed to be in our home in Morocco. We're not. We're here in Dubai. Losing money hand over fist as a result, and creating new ways to make money and new ways to generate ways to go forward. That's creation mode. That's creation mode. And we always have that choice. I say we because my partner, my business partner is also my wife. My wife is also my business partner. And we've been doing this work for many, many years now, literally for decades. We've twice lost everything that we had, and we've twice made it all back again. So when we say these things, it's not a theory for us. It's not something we read about in the book. It's something we live. It's something that we've done more than once and know how to do. So here's survival mode, which is where you don't want to be unless that guy's coming at you with the axe. I'm going to assume it's a guy because statistically there's far more violence performed by men than there is by women. So I'm just going to assume it's a guy who's coming at you with an axe. Now, you need to be in survival mode. Now, left to itself, the brain will tend to do that because it's looking to make sure you stay alive. So it's looking for the car coming out of the blue. It's looking for somebody jumping on you. It's looking for all these things. It's a primitive survival mechanism in your brain, and it's going to be there. Now, the problem for us, as we all know nowadays, especially from the neuroscientists, we cheer for the neuroscientists for telling us what the psychologists already knew, that it will tend to do this. So, it's not going to help you right now if you're in one of these difficult situations financially or economically to go into survival mode. It's going to make it harder for you to deal with it. What you need to do is you need to go into creative mode, creation mode, because survival mode makes it difficult to think creatively. To think creatively, we need to be able to join up the dots that we haven't even seen yet. Join up the dots that we haven't even seen. That means somehow we got to see them. Now in survival mode, you are going to be looking at the one dot that's in front of you, and you're going to be afraid of it, and you're going to be worried about it, and you're going to be anxious. You might feel shame because you should never have got into this situation, and you might feel guilt at the fact you pulled other people into it with you. Now, all these things might be there, and all of them are going to be no use to you whatsoever. Now, the other thing about survival mode is it tends to reference the past. The past is fixed. It's fixed because it's already happened. It couldn't be not fixed. It's happened. Whatever it was that you did, you now have to live with. You now have to deal with. However, creation mode is exactly the opposite from this. Creation mode is generated by conscious and deliberate intervention. And we have to know how to do that. And we have to know when to do it and where to do it. Once we start to do that, go back and read your stories. We all have inspiring stories. And if we don't, then we should get some of great people who have done great things in many different fields. You will find this structure is always present. These people are always able to step out of survival mode, sometimes even when you would think they would have to be in it because things were so bad, but they didn't. They stepped out of it. And they managed to generate a different way of thinking about things. That's where you have the potential to make changes that will work for you. Now, the creation mode is characterized by positive emotions, happiness, inspiration, compassion, courage, all the good stuff. And especially humor. This is really, all this stuff's good, but humor, to be able to laugh at anything is key. And you know why it's key? Another big cheer for the neuroscientists. It's key because when you laugh, when you're amused, you generate certain chemicals in your brain. You generate dopamine. Dopamine, you generate other things as well, like good old serotonin, which enables you to think faster. You generate endorphins, which enables you to deal with pain, physical, mental, or emotional, to not feel it so strongly or to even eliminate it. And the other thing is it generates dopamine. Now, dopamine is the neurochemical that enables you to learn. The more dopamine you have in the brain, the faster and the better you can learn. Now, if you're going to get out of a difficult situation, if you're going to develop new ways of creating money and so on, you need to be able to learn faster. And it references the potential future. Now, what I mean by that is I say potential future because the future doesn't exist. The future hasn't happened. So that now there's a lot of people now trying to convince us that we're locked now in an eternal future of wearing masks and staying in the house. And after this virus, there'll be another one. And after that, there'll be another one. And everybody has to be vaccinated. It's all rubbish. It's all nonsense because that's just their idea. And they've got their own negative emotions and their own limited thinking that generates those ideas. And they've also got their own greed and their own desire for power and massive wealth and so on. And so they generate that way of thinking. But that's not the future because the future hasn't happened. We all can create the future. And I recommend that that's what we all do. We create our own futures and we combine and we get together to generate communally a better future, the future that serves all of us instead of serving just a few. Now, When you're in this state, it becomes natural to think creatively. You will, and again, we've all done this. You know, it's what again, Harvard, the concept of positive psychology developed out of Harvard. It's a guy called Csikszentmihalyi. Apologies to any Hungarians that might be in on this. Who came up with the concept of flow. And everybody knows about flow, and they all talk about flow. And we all know that when you get into that space, it becomes natural to be able to hit the ball as it comes at you. It becomes natural to come up with a good idea. So how do we get into the creation mode? So back to the resourceful state. So to get in creation mode and start to make things go in the direction we want them to go, that's good for us and not good for someone else necessarily, we need to be in a resourceful state, and we need to have a clear vision. So I think by now you're probably getting the idea of underlying structure as we go through this. Now here's a nice two-part structure again. So we're going to use something called the happiness advantage, which was developed quite literally in Harvard over several decades and tested around the world in many different situations and during times of economic stress. Tested all during the last slump in 2008. Remember that, anybody? That's 2008. That was when people drove their expensive cars to Dubai airport and with a single suitcase got onto the plane and left their car behind because they were so concerned. Loads of people did this. Maybe some of the people in on this webinar are some of those people. We know of people who did this. However, in that situation, what the researchers from Harvard found is that even in that situation, people were able to generate a state of happiness by using what they call the happiness advantage. And the other aspects, that's what we take from Harvard. Thanks, Harvard. And what we take from the other side, which we take from dimensional macrostructure alignment, Robert Fritz, is effective visualization. I say effective because we said in the beginning, there are some ways of thinking are more powerful than others. Some ways of visualizing are more powerful than others. You know, some ways of walking are more powerful than others. Some ways of eating are better than others. There's always a better and a worse way to do things, a more powerful and a less powerful way to do things. So here's what we're going to recommend. So let's have a look at the happiness advantage. Now, I'm going to give you just 5 things that these are the things that have been proved to make people happy. It's that simple. And not just make people happy by sort of subjective measurements, people going, oh yeah, I feel happy, but by external measurements, by people actually taking brainwave readings of them, by finding out how their behavior has changed. And these are some of the things. Now, this is an introductory webinar, free webinar for a workshop, 1-day online workshop they're doing shortly. So we're going to give you the outline of these ideas, and when you come to that workshop, what we are going to do is we're going to go into these things in detail and do these things in practice. Fortunately, this is one of the subjects that you can work with online very effectively. I mean, there are some things you really need to be in a room together. There's some things you have to do physically. Some things really lend themselves to online work, and this is one of them. So here's one of the things, and these are things you can start doing right away. Each day, and there are reasons why these things are the way they are. We can't go into a lot of detail in the space of this webinar, but all the justification, the explanations are there, and we can go into those in the workshop. Each day, just write 3 new things that you're grateful for. Some people say just think about them, but personally, I think it's always good to write things. It makes it real. It moves it from the subjective to the objective. Again, people who know us and the work we do, we're very concerned with what we call the 3 realities model, which is that there's not one kind of reality. Many people get lost and struggle because they think there's one, and they try and make things that fit, that don't fit. There's 3, there's objective, there's subjective, and there's consensual. So when you move these things from just in your mind to a piece of paper, you've just made it from subjective to objective. And then take 2 minutes. Now, I was just doing this last night, there's 2 minutes, and just write about a positive experience you've had. And it's fascinating, it's absolutely fascinating, because what I generally find when I'm doing this is that 2 minutes is just way too short. You know, once you get going, even if you're feeling a bit fed up or a bit tired or something, once you actually start focusing on something that is positive, it does tend to generate more and more. And the 2 minutes alarm goes off and you think, you know, forget it, you know, I need half an hour for this. This is good. I'm enjoying this. And as you do that, you will re-experience that. And of course, because you're re-experiencing it by writing about it, guess what's happening in your brain? You're generating the neurochemicals that are going to give you the experiences that you want to have. And being able to be in that resourceful state is going to enable you to develop. This is why this is called prosperity mindset. This webinar and the forthcoming workshop, it's not called, you know, how to make money. It's called, it's about developing a prosperity mindset, the mindset that will enable you to do these things. Exercise, any kind of exercise, no need to wait till all the gyms are open. So many people think they have to wear funny clothes and special trainers. You really don't, you know. You can do push-ups right now. You can just, you know, get down on the floor right now, do a few push-ups, you know. Yeah, you can have a couple of cans of beans on your desk where you work, and when you're waiting for something to download, you can do exercises with the bean cans. There's a million ways that you can just exercise. Exercise, again, it generates the right chemicals in your body and makes you feel good. And, you know, 15 minutes a day, you know, is great. It works. Meditation. Now, you know, meditation is taken to mean almost anything nowadays. It means just about anything you want it to mean. So you can carry on taking it to mean anything you want it to mean. In this context, all we're saying is spend some time focusing inside. We recommend simple stuff like focus on your breath and seek the place between the breaths. Seek the place between. There's a space. If you can identify that space, this can lead you into a whole other dimension of understanding, trust me. Well, we can talk about that maybe in another webinar. But it's a gateway. If you can identify that space, it's a gateway. Do practical stuff, practical things you can do, and then perform random acts of kindness. Now, we've talked about these things in workshops before, and you know, said to people, give us an example of a random act of kindness. And I remember somebody saying, take out a subscription to a charity. That is kind, but it's not random. So the thing is, it has to be spontaneous. You know, it's not like you just go, oh, yeah, I'll give some money to some charity, and then you just forget all about it. It has to be a living experience. So each day you want to stop and think, how could you do that? How could you do that? You know, maybe, I mean, we're staying in some hotel apartments. When I go down to reception to talk to the guy, I always make a point of something kind. It's ever so simple, you know, smiling at people is kind generally. Asking them about themselves is kind, taking an interest in them, listening to them for a moment, tell you about something. There are so many ways, you know, so many ways. If you're out driving, let the other person go first. Sometimes. So, random act of kindness, just a moment, another random act of kindness you can do, especially if you're locked in your house and you never used to be, can be, before you get annoyed with them, just seek that space that we've been talking about and take a moment. Yeah, I would like to request that whoever's got their mic unmuted and is making funny noises, could you just mute it? You can unmute it shortly. It's just that I get to hear the funny noises. Now, so number one was being able to generate a resourceful state. And we have chosen the resourceful state of happiness because we've got a nice, clear, scientific, neuroscientifically established way of creating happiness, which I do every day and which you do every day. Now, can do every day if you're not already. Now, the other thing we need to create something in the external world is a clear vision. Now, I introduced you to a picture of my house earlier on. This is my place in Morocco. And I've introduced you, I've used this in this webinar. I was, you know, thinking about what examples to use. I thought, well, this is a real example. And it's always good if you can create real examples. And I won't go into the whole story, but many things happened in our lives that got in the way of creating the thing that we wanted to create, and we created it anyway. And we did it by doing these two things. We did it, I won't tell you what all those things are now, I might tell you in the workshop. Depends how interested you are, really. You have to say, oh, please tell me, and then I'll tell you. But we found exactly what we're talking about worked for us and continues to work for us. Generate that resourceful state and also have a clear vision of what you want to create. And not just what you want to create, what you choose to create. Choose is a big thing here. Now, when we say to have an effective visualization technique, what we found is that it's very, very useful to be aware of your current reality as well as your vision of reality. And there are quite specific technical reasons for that. One of them is that your unconscious mind, probably everybody in this webinar knows how powerful the unconscious mind can be. You know, some people say 95% of us is unconscious, but that unconscious mind is what puts all the pieces together while we're not looking. It's what does all the amazing things. It's what makes us sick when we worry. It's what makes us healthy when we concentrate on good things. It does all these things for us. We can't actually do that. We can't get in there and change the blood cells, but our unconscious mind can. Our unconscious mind can see connections between things that we don't even know are there, and then put them together and present them to our conscious mind. It does all these things. So keeping in mind what your current reality is, which you probably don't want, at the same time as holding in mind the thing that you do want and making it as clear as possible, does tend to bring things together in a way that makes it more easy to go forward. As like we said before, this isn't the law of attraction, or that may be related, but this is nothing against law of attraction particularly. But you know, some guy wrote an interesting book called "If the Law of Attraction is So Powerful, Where's My Ferrari?" Now I haven't actually read this book, but I thought it's a very interesting question. So yeah, let's do the focus, let's do the positive visualization, and be aware that we also have to work. Now in this space here, I talked about space a lot in this webinar, but in this space here, there's a couple of things will be going on. Your unconscious mind will be producing all the links that you don't know about consciously, and the other thing is you will be working. You will be identifying what things can I do to become more prosperous in my current situation. Here's my current situation, doesn't look very prosperous. This on the left here is a picture of this, how it used to be, which is just a field full of rocks. You know, that's all it was. It was just, that's how we started. Nothing, absolutely nothing there, just a load of rocks. There was a couple of goats who wandered in around occasionally. And over time, what this did is it became what it is now, which is this. Now, this is our house now in Morocco. And if you're on those balconies now, you'd be looking straight across the Atlantic Ocean with a, you know, an unlimited view, just straight across the Atlantic Ocean. And if you looked off to the back of the house and to the side of the house, you would see apparently endless forest, just forest as far as the eye can. I mean, I'm not exaggerating here. You know, it's just forest for miles and miles. Over here, over this side, that's the north. You know, you can see a few houses here and there where other people like us who have realised their visions have made the houses. All the houses are dotted around, and there's big spaces between them. So I use this because, like I said earlier, it's real. Well, we did this. We made this happen. We're ready to move on now and make something happen. But this is where we would be right now. Before the nonsense happened with the COVID pandemic, before that all happened and all these restrictions were imposed, we were supposed to be back there right now, creating our new course, creating our new diploma in integrative psychotherapy, which is, you know, what we have cooking. But we'll be back there shortly, and we'll create that, and then we'll move on to the next thing. So that's just about everything I wanted to say in terms of how we can understand, how we can identify structures for creating a prosperity mindset. Now, my emphasis is on the mindset. And the reason my emphasis is there is because that's what the Harvard guys found worked. They went around the world over a couple of decades, looking in many different situations, teaching people these techniques and finding over and over again that when people were happy, they were more effective. Doctors made more accurate diagnoses. People who were in jobs made more money. People who were looking for jobs were more likely to get one. People who were in sales sold more. So basically, when you're happy, you are more effective. And so in any area you apply that, you will become more effective at doing that. This is why we're calling it a prosperity mindset. It's not the other way around. It's not, oh, how do I make money and then I can be happy? It's let's be happy anyway. Let's generate the happiness along with that positive experience, that positive and resourceful state. Let's get very clear about what we want. Again, often people don't know what they want. It's important to get clear. And sometimes when serious changes and big negative things happen in our lives, that can actually be an opportunity to get clear. I've had conversations with a number of people since the pandemic started who have told me how they've done more reading than they've ever done before. They've done more research. They spent time with their kids. They've got into meditation. I mean, not that I think it's a good idea to lock everybody in their homes to make them do that. But for, you know, again, these are the people for whom, when that wind blew, they started putting up the windmills and they started generating something out of it. And then there are the other people who have just become depressed and tired and irritable and all the other things. So, you know, back to something we said earlier, we do always have a choice. Here's when the course is, here's how much it is, and here's the time it is. So just contact Illuminations if you would like to come and join us on that course to learn how to actually put these things into practice. This has just been talking about them. We're going to do the practical exercise. We're going to get you to start to feel it. Feeling is key. We're going to get you to start to think in new ways, to make new thought structures, and to really start to make this stuff work in your lives. So look forward to seeing you there. Now I have to get out of this. don't think I want to share my screen anymore. Okay, so now I can see lots of boxes. So I've got lots of names here, but not many faces. Great to have some faces. And feel free to unmute your microphone now if there's any questions you have, any comments you wish to make, any offers of buying me dinner. I mean, anything, you know, anything that springs to mind. This is the time.
Hi, Phil. This is Irina. Thank you very
Hello,
much.
Irina.
Showing you my face.
What is all this? I always think, oh, that's funny. Somebody else's face. Where have you gone? You've gone somewhere else.
Sorry, I can't. I have a beauty mask on, so I don't want to.
You have a mask on?
Yes. Well, yeah, a different one this time. So.
What, like a spooky mask or something like this?
No, it's not a spooky mask. I'm not showing you my face. Anyway, well, thank you so much. You know, I find your webinars very motivating. I'm buzzing. I'm buzzing with energy, and I just want to. I want to just do something now. You know, like really be in a creative. I'm in a creative mode now. Thank you so much for that. It's just amazing.
Well, that's really good.
Yes, it is, and it's a beautiful energy that you're delivering together with it. The way you're delivering it all is amazing. So, well, so nice to see you, and I'm glad I had to re-sign in because there was no sound, but I'm glad I did, and I enjoyed it very much.
Good, that's great. I'm so pleased that you came along, and I'm so pleased that you enjoyed it and you found it useful. Well, as you know, because for other people's benefit, you know, you have worked with us before. You know that we mean what we say,
Yes.
and you know that we walk the talk, and we know that you do, because we know some of the amazing things that you've done, which I won't talk about. It's up to you if you want to talk about them. But we know how you've made, you know, difficult situations work, real challenges. And yes, really the best out of those things.
Thank you very much, Phil.
I'd still like to see the mask, though. I really would.
I'll send you a picture.
Is it just other people you don't want to see the mask? Is that what the issue is?
Yes. Well, yeah. You may say that. All right. Thank you again.
Okay, Irina. Great to hear from you again. See you soon.
See you soon. Bye, Phil.
Bye-bye. Okay, so that was